You have a device inside you. Right now, it's so small you've probably never thought about it, but without it, your heart might stop beating tomorrow. Not because of anything you did wrong. Because the electrical signal that keeps your heart's rhythm alive has been failing, silently, for decades and nobody told you. Your heart is not a muscle that just squeezes, it's a clock. It runs on electricity. Every beat starts with a tiny electrical impulse generated by a cluster of cells called the sinoatrial node. That's your heart's natural pacemaker. The signal travels through your heart muscle in a precise path, telling each section when to contract. When it works, you never notice. When it fails, your heart either beats too slowly to pump blood to your brain, or it stops coordinating entirely. The top half and the bottom half beating at different rhythms, like two musicians who can't hear each other. Doctors call this heart block, and for most of human history, if you developed it, you died. In 1956, an engineer named Wilson Greatbatch was building a device to record heart rhythms. He worked at the University of Buffalo. He had a box of resistors on his bench, small components that control the flow of electricity through a circuit. He reached for one rated at 10,000 ohms. He grabbed the wrong one. It was rated at 1 megohm, 100 times more resistance than he needed. He wired it in anyway. Expected the machine to start recording the rhythm of a horse heart. That was the experiment. Instead, the circuit started pulsing. A steady, rhythmic electrical beat. On, off, almost exactly like a human heart. He didn't panic, he didn't throw it away. He sat there and stared and thought this could keep someone alive. You're holding a wrong resistor, a mistake, an accident, and you're about to change the world with it. But to understand why that accident mattered, you have to go back further. Because Greatbatch wasn't the first person to think about delivering electricity to a heart that had stopped listening to its own signals. In 1930, a New York cardiologist named Albert Hyman published a paper in the Archives of Internal Medicine describing what he called an artificial pacemaker. The device was the size of a small suitcase. It had a hand-cranked generator. It delivered electricity through a needle inserted directly into the chest wall and into the heart muscle. It was crude. It was painful. Most of the medical establishment thought it was either useless or obscene. Hyman received death threats. Doctors accused him of playing God. But Hyman had watched patients die of sudden cardiac arrest. People whose hearts simply stopped, even though they were young, even though they were otherwise healthy. He understood that the heart was an electrical machine. He knew that if you could deliver the right pulse at the right moment, you could restart the rhythm. The idea was right. The technology was wrong. His device needed an external power source. It needed someone to operate it. It couldn't stay inside the body. It couldn't sustain a heartbeat for more than a few minutes. It was an emergency tool, not a solution. 20 years later, in 1950, a Canadian electrical engineer named John Hopps built a better version. Working at the National Research Council of Canada, Hopps designed a device that could deliver electrical pulses through a catheter. A thin, flexible tube threaded through a vein directly into the heart's right ventricle. No more needles driven through the chest. No more hand cranking. Hopps's device worked, but it was still external. The generator sat on a table beside the patient. Wires ran from the machine through the skin and into the vein. You couldn't walk with it. You couldn't sleep with it. You couldn't live with it. It was a hospital machine. A last resort for patients who were already dying in a bed. The idea kept advancing. The machine kept failing. And then Wilson Greatbatch grabbed the wrong resistor. What made his accident different from everything that came before? Two things changed at exactly the right moment. First, transistors existed. In 1947, three physicists at Bell Labs, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley, invented the transistor. It was a tiny device that could switch electrical signals on and off without the bulky vacuum tubes that had powered every electronic machine for decades. Transistors were small. They used almost no power. They could run on a battery the size of a coin. Greatbatch saw what that meant. A transistorized circuit could be small enough to fit inside a human body. It could run on a battery that lasted months. It could pulse without a table, without wires, without a hospital room. Second, Greatbatch understood something that Hyman and Hopps had never fully solved. The problem wasn't just delivering electricity to the heart. The problem was doing it from inside the body, continuously, reliably, for years. Not as an emergency measure, as a life. He built his first prototype in his barn outside Buffalo. No laboratory, no funding, no team, just a man in a barn soldering transistors onto a circuit board, wrapping it in epoxy, testing it, failing and rebuilding. He worked nights and weekends. His wife brought him coffee. His kids asked what he was building. He wasn't entirely sure how to explain it. It took him 2 years to get a device he trusted enough to show a surgeon. In 1958, he walked into the Veterans Administration Hospital in Buffalo and found Dr. William Chardek, a thoracic surgeon who had spent his career cutting open chests. Greatbatch showed him a circuit board the size of a matchbox. He told Chardek it could make a heart beat. Chardek didn't believe him, but he had patients dying of heart block and he had no tools to save them, so he agreed to try. They implanted the device in a dog, a large dog whose heart had been surgically altered to simulate complete heart block. The pacemaker fired. The dog's heart, sluggish and erratic, locked onto the rhythm and started beating steadily. The dog lived. They tried it on more dogs, each time the same result. A failing heart, given a new rhythm from a small box, recovered and held. Chardek was convinced. He implanted the first Greatbatch pacemaker in a human patient in June 1960. The patient was a 77-year-old man with complete heart block. His heart rate had dropped below 30 beats per minute. He was barely conscious. Without intervention, he would have been dead within days. The pacemaker fired. His heart rate rose to 70. He woke up. He sat up. He asked for food. He lived for 18 more months, which doesn't sound like much until you remember that without the pacemaker, he had days. But here's the part of the story most people get wrong. The first implantable pacemaker ever placed inside a human body was not Greatbatch's. It was Swedish. In October 1958, a Swedish engineer named Rune Elmqvist designed a small, rounded pacemaker powered by rechargeable nickel-cadmium batteries. A surgeon named Ake Senning implanted it into a 43-year-old engineer named Arne Larsson. Larsson had developed a complete heart block after a viral infection. His heart rate dropped dangerously low dozens of times a day. He could barely stand. The first device failed within 3 hours. Its batteries died. Senning implanted a second one. It lasted longer, but eventually it too stopped. Arne Larsson didn't die. He kept going. Over the next 43 years, he received 26 different pacemakers. Each one was smaller, more reliable, longer lasting than the last. He outlived his surgeon. He outlived his engineer. He died in 2001 at the age of 86, not from heart failure, but from a skin infection that had nothing to do with his heart at all. The man who was supposed to die at 43 lived for another 4 decades because someone kept putting a small box in his chest, and his heart kept listening. But the pacemaker still had a problem: the batteries. Early pacemakers ran on mercury zinc cells. They lasted about 2 years. That meant surgery every 24 months, cutting the patient open, removing the old device, implanting a new one. Every surgery carried risk. Every replacement was a chance for infection, for error, for failure. Wilson Greatbatch solved this too. He spent years developing a lithium iodide battery, a power source that could last a decade or more inside the human body without recharging, without leaking, without corroding the tissue around it. The lithium iodide cell he perfected became the standard power source for nearly every pacemaker manufactured after 1972. One man, a wrong resistor, and then a battery that changed everything. Today, more than 1 million pacemakers are implanted every year worldwide. There are over 3 million people walking around this planet with a small metal box in their chest, sending electrical pulses to their heart, keeping them alive with every beat. Most of them don't think about it. They wake up. They go to work, they play with their kids, they run, they travel, they forget. That's the real revolution. The pacemaker didn't just keep people alive, it made people forget they were dying. It turned a death sentence into a background hum. It gave people the most valuable thing medicine can offer: not years, normalcy. Wilson Greatbatch held over 325 patents. He was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 1986, alongside Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers. He died in 2011 at the age of 92. He spent his life telling people the same story. He grabbed the wrong resistor. It was an accident. He almost threw it away. You've made mistakes today. Wrong turns, wrong words, wrong numbers pulled from the wrong box. You've reached for something and gotten something else entirely. And most of the time you've caught yourself, you've corrected it, you've moved on. But what if one of those mistakes was a heartbeat? What if one of those errors, pulsing quietly on your workbench, was exactly what someone needed, and you just hadn't stopped long enough to listen? The pacemaker lives inside the chest of someone you've never met. It beats when they can't. It holds a rhythm they forgot. It is silent, steady, and invisible. And it exists because one man didn't throw away his mistake.